Hey guys, it's Rosa here. I hope you're all having a lovely day. Today I'm going to be doing a little bit of a sew along with you. I'm going to be making a lined sleeveless Moneta dress by Colette patterns. I'm going to be showing you how to line it, how I cut out pieces, how the whole dress goes together, and also how I draft a neckband to go around the neckline, and how I gather up the fabric onto the clear elastic. So let's go. So the first thing we're going to need to do is cut out a bodice front and a bodice back from our pretty fabric. These are cut on the fold, so they're really symmetrical, and you're going to need to cut the same thing out again from your lining fabric. I just use this quite cheap, lightweight white jersey fabric. It's a little bit see-through, but it doesn't really matter because it's going to be lining the dress, it's going to be inside of it. I think this is a viscose blend with a little bit of lycra in there too. Now it's time for us to cut out our neckline binding. This is really easy, and what you need to do is just measure the neckline of your Moneta dress and then take away roughly 15% from that and cut a rectangle this length. The width of your rectangle is really completely up to you. I would probably say about maybe 4 or 5 centimeters, depending on how wide you want your finished band to be, just bearing in mind you're going to have it folded in half. And the last thing you're going to need to cut out are your skirt pieces. So you've got a skirt front and a skirt back. And now I think we're ready to get sewing. So the first step when you're sewing your Moneta dress is to stabilise the shoulder seams. I'm stabilising the shoulders here, cutting a little bit of clear elastic out to the same length as the shoulder seams. And you can see there I'm going to just zigzag that onto the shoulder pieces. I'm not sure this is actually in the instructions, and I should probably say up front here that I don't actually do all of my Moneta dress exactly as the instruction says. There are a few things which I've changed just because they suit me better. So if you are following the instructions completely, you might see it's a little bit different to how I do it. So it's really completely up to you how you choose to do it. They'll both end up really nice. This is just how I find it easier. Once you've stabilised those shoulders, you're going to need to pin the bodice front to the bodice back at the shoulder seams. And sew across. I'm using my favourite stretch stitch, which on my sewing machine is number 13. You can see I'm just programming that in here. And then just sew across those two seams. So you're joining the front to the back at the shoulder seams. Once you've done that with your pretty fabric, you'll need to do the same with your lining fabric, although there's no need to stabilise the seam in the same way. And once you've finished, it should look a little bit like this. And I've just laid out the pretty fabric on the floor with the right sides facing up, and I'm laying on top of that the lining fabric with the right sides facing down. So you've got right sides facing one another, right sides touching. I'm going to pin them together at the armhole. So you can see here I'm starting to pin all the way around the armhole. I've sped it up a little bit because it's not very interesting to watch, but you can see by the time you've pinned both armholes together, it should look a bit like this. Once you've pinned your armholes together, you can go back to your sewing machine, and using that same stretch stitch, it's really up to you again which stretch stitch you really like, as long as you've got the right needle on your sewing machine. You might need to loosen the tension a little bit on your sewing machine when you're sewing with knits, but again, it's always good to have a little test on a piece of scrap fabric, so leave, if anything left over from when you're cutting out, use that just to make sure you got your tension and everything right. Once you've sewn your armholes together, it's time to turn the whole thing inside out, and once you've done this, you'll see that the armholes are really nicely finished and they are ready to go. So the next thing we need to do is pin together the side seams. So we're going to pin the bodice front to the bodice back at the side seams. So we're going to start off here and bringing together the bodice back and the bodice front on the main fabric and pin down that side there. And once you've done that, you're going to do the same on the lining pieces. I'm going to do it quite slowly here because it sounds a little bit complicated, but I think once you see how it works, it will all make sense. Once I pin that side, I'm going to move on to the other side and pin up, making sure I always match the underarm seams with a pin first. When you've sewn up your side seams, it should look a little bit like this. Now it's time to gather up our skirt onto the clear elastic. So what I'm doing here is just measuring the lower edge of the bodice piece, and I'm going to cut 2 pieces of clear elastic this exact length. Once you've cut your 2 pieces of clear elastic, you're going to go back to your skirt pieces, and I'm just setting out here on the floor, and I'm marking the center point on the skirt, the top edge of the skirt piece, and I'm also going to mark out the center piece on the elastic. I'm going to match those 2 together using pins, so pinning the centers together, and then I'm going to pin both ends in place, and you'll be able to see here that of course the elastic is a lot smaller than the skirt, but that's okay because it's going to gather up to fit. Now we're going to go back to our sewing machine and sew that elastic on. So using this time a zigzag stitch, because that's what I find to be the best for attaching this clear elastic. We're going to start off by locking in our stitches and then being careful not to stretch the fabric but to only stretch the elastic. We're going to start sewing along. I think this is actually easiest to understand by just watching. So you can see here I'm stretching the elastic until it's the same length as the skirt, and then just slowly but surely sewing along with that zigzag stitch, and it will start to create some gathers, which is really exciting. It's kind of like magic. Once you've gathered up your front and back skirt pieces, it's time to pin them together at the side seams. So you can see here I've put them right sides facing, so right sides touching, pretty sides touching, and I've pinned down both sides. And then we're going to simply go back to the sewing machine and using our stretch stitch again, sew all the way down both side seams. Now that we've done that, we're going to pop our skirt flat down on the surface, and inside of the skirt I'm going to place the bodice. Now it's really important to make sure that the pretty sides are facing one another, so that you can see here you are able to pin them together all the way around. So you've got your gathered up skirt and you're matching that up, starting off of course by matching up the side seams to the bodice, the bottom of the bodice. I'm going to pin all the way around, making sure I catch in that lining as well until it looks like this. Once you've pinned your bodice to your skirt all the way around in a circle, making sure you've not got any puckers or any bits which don't quite match up, we're going to go back to the sewing machine, and again using our trusty stretch stitch we're going to sew all the way around in a big circle. Once I've done that, I like to hem my skirt, and you can see what I've done here is just fold over about 1.5 centimeters, something like that, and then I'm going to be zigzagging all the way around my hem just so it looks nice and tidy. Now it's time for us to bind that neckline, so grab your neckline binding and fold it in half lengthwise and pin it together along the short edge. Once you've pinned it together, take it over to your sewing machine and sew along that short edge to make a circle. Once you've made your circle, you need to mark out, I usually do this just by folding, the centre back and centre front points, and then do the same on your Moneta dress and then match up these 2 points. Once you've pinned the centre front and the centre back to your to your neckline binding, you can then go ahead and ease in the rest of your neckline binding. Remember, it's really important that you only stretch the neck binding and you do not stretch the neckline of your Moneta top. I like to use loads and loads of pins, as you can see here when I'm securing my neck binding, and you can go right to your sewing machine and sew all the way around. Once you've sewn your neck binding to your dress, you'll need to go right back in and then top stitch it down so you don't have that flappy seam getting in the way. I top stitch just using a zigzag, but again, if you'd rather, you could use a twin needle to do this. It's really completely up to you. Last thing to do is give your dress a quick press and voila, a brand new Moneta dress ready to wear. I do hope you enjoyed this tutorial, guys, and it was helpful for you. I think it's a really great, simple little sew. It fits really well. I've seen some amazing versions with the Moneta Party, which is over on Instagram. Yeah, and I think it's really versatile. I mean, this is a great little dress that you can adapt to wear to a party, to work, just to chill out at home. It is so comfy. It is total secret pajamas. So yeah, I'd really recommend it. Anyway, that's everything for today, guys. Please do give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and click subscribe for new sewing vlogs every week. I will see you again very soon. Have a great week. Bye.